Hello everyone, I'm Hunter Fillingjim and this is my presentation for my environmental science class through GoView. Um, I'm taking this course through dual enrollment at my high school. The case that I chose is the infiltration of Oak Ridge in Tennessee, which is a nuclear complex in Tennessee, and it was infiltrated by an 82-year-old nun, which I think is really awesome. And I chose this case because um, how often do you hear about some really old woman like breaking into a nuclear facility in the form of protest? So yeah, I chose this case because it's kind of badass, and it's really interested me. So this complex was made in 1942 to help with the Manhattan Project, and it also continued production of nuclear weapons into the Cold War. Um, Eventually, it stopped creating nuclear bombs, but it still housed a ton of uranium, and this uranium was very dangerous to the environment. It contaminated the soil, the air, and the water. And between 1944 and 1985, almost 30,000 workers died from various forms of cancer related to these chemical leaks, which is very devastating to that rural area in Tennessee. Um, so here's where the 82-year-old nun comes in. Her name is Megan Rice, and she is a known public activist, specifically an anti-nuclear activist, and she has not she believes in non-violent protest, specifically non-violent but dramatic. Um, she believed that nuclear production was one of the leading causes of poverty in the United States, because of all the money that the government uses for nuclear production rather than giving back to their citizens or even third world countries that rely on us. She specifically had an interest in Oak Ridge because there was a lot of practices that it had followed that were immoral. Like when it first started, they uh, gave a 2 weeks notice to all the locals living there to leave their homes, which was kind of crazy, but they did it in the means of war efforts, and they got away with a lot by doing that, including segregation in the workforce and etc. Um, but when this nun was 82 years old, she infiltrated the very high security complex that had signs everywhere saying trespassers will be shot dead on site, and spiked fences and a bunch of crazy stuff like barbed wire. And she managed to infiltrate the complex despite the threat of death. She wasn't alone. She was with accomplices, but together they peacefully walked around the complex, spreading messages on the walls. And eventually, Megan uh, approached a guard there, and and gave him a statement of indicting the U.S. government for its nuclear program, which ended up getting her arrested. She would actually Her and her accomplices were supposed to face 20 years in prison and 100,000 in fines. But 2 years after being in prison, they got an appeal to be released because she argued that while it may have been illegal to trespass on that property was committing illegal acts. So they ended up winning that appeal and proving that the government can be doing dangerous stuff behind citizens' backs, and that citizens can do something about it. So that's kind of the lesson I learned. It showed that uh, the government doesn't create perfect things. As a matter of fact, a lot of times the government can harm their citizens more than help it, by having these dangerous facilities that can contaminate drinking water and air and stuff. And also, just it being low security in general for an 82-year-old woman to break into a complex, that shows that they should definitely have some better security, and it just gives awareness to the anti-nuclear protests that go on and the reasons for it. So yeah, that's my presentation. Thank you for listening.